Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas, and in this video I'm going to tell you all about my new favorite WordPress host called SpinupWP. Okay, so as you well know, if you are a regular viewer of this channel, one of the things that I really like to do is to share things with you that I'm currently using or find useful. And one of those things that I find useful and I talk about a lot on this channel as well is WordPress. And one of the challenges, as we talked about in a previous video, is finding good hosting for WordPress. Now, on the plus side, there's a ton of options out there. However, each of them kind of have their pros and cons, their strengths and their weaknesses. Now, the hosting provider I typically recommend is one by the name of WP Engine, and I still do recommend it. I think it's a good host, particularly for beginners. It's great because they have a really helpful and supportive support team, and they've got everything kind of honed in so that you just kind of create your account, you jump in there, and you're off and running with WordPress. Now, one of the downsides to a hosting service like WP Engine or some of the ones out there that are similar to WP Engine is while it does make things really simple to get up and running, like I said, there's always pros and cons. And one of the cons is that you lose out on two things. One, some of the flexibility and control of what you can do with that particular server, since you're kind of on a shared hosting. It means that you're kind of sharing that hosting environment with a whole bunch of other sites. So you can't really tinker or hire a developer or work with a developer to jump on that server and fine tune it and tweak it. The second issue I have with WP Engine, it's not really an issue, it's just something that's kind of a limitation of that type of hosting, is that it's a little bit limited in terms of its power and in terms of its speed. It's pretty good, it's not too bad, but again, going back to that previous point, one of the things that slows it down a little bit is the fact that you're kind of on this shared hosting and all those other sites along right there with you are consuming resources on the server, which can at times make it go a little bit slower. Now, on the other side of the spectrum out there for hosting, there is a type of hosting called VPS. And VPS stands for Virtual Private Server. And so it's not that you necessarily get like your own dedicated machine. Some hosts you can actually purchase a dedicated machine that they have on a rack for you that's your server. But it's kind of like this environment. It's this area on the server that only you are going to be using. So whether you're going to host one website on there or whether you're going to host a ton of websites on there, it doesn't matter as long as you have your own kind of VPS environment. There's a number of different advantages to VPS type hosting, and one of them is the fact that you get all that freedom and flexibility. You can, again, you're kind of working with that server, and then that server can be whatever you want it to be. The other super useful thing about a VPS provider is that it's way more affordable. You're gonna get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of the power of that server and the performance and everything else that kind of goes along with that, because you're not just buying a pre-packaged hosting on maybe a lower level server. You actually get to pick what level server you're working with. So whether that's super affordable down at like $6 a month, or whether you've got something that's got like, you know, 3 or 4 like dedicated CPUs and massive amount of hard drive space and super fast, up to like $500 a month. It's totally up to you how much power you throw at it. Now, as I said, there are some downsides with a hosting service like WP Engine. There are also going to be downsides to a VPS provider. While you do get all that freedom and flexibility, it means that you get a ton of complexity that comes along with that. And so that brings us to SpinupWP. SpinupWP is actually a hosting control panel that actually connects to pretty much any VPS provider that is available today. And so what SpinupWP does is it kind of works as like this helper, this kind of in between of a VPS provider and you, the user. And so what you can do, and we'll demo it here in a second, is you can actually go into SpinupWP, pick your VPS provider, whether it's going to be something like Amazon or DigitalOcean or many of the tons of VPS providers out there. SpinupWP connects to that VPS provider and then spins up for you a WordPress, or first it spins up for you a server with as much resources as you want to throw at it. And then it also walks you through and automates the process of installing and configuring WordPress on that server. So it's a lot of the things you're used to on something like a HostGator or a Bluehost or a WP Engine, only you're getting all of the benefits and the power and the speed and the flexibility of one of those VPS providers. So because you're working with both SpinupWP as well as a VPS provider, it's not quite as simple as something you would get out of WP Engine. However, what I've personally found is the couple of extra steps that it takes are well worth it for two major reasons. The first is that it's way more affordable. You're gonna be spending most likely less than half, depending on how complex of a site, how many sites you're hosting, but you're probably gonna be, and this is conservative, likely less than half of what you're gonna be spending at WP Engine, and you're gonna end up with a faster site, most likely. The other cool thing is it's got a lot of the things that WP Engine has, or a number of other providers have as well, such as site backups, it's got security, it's got all of the things that you really need, such as page caching, all the things that a WordPress website needs to run and to run well. Okay, so here I am at the SpinupWP site, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. All you're gonna do is click Start Free Trial. I'm just gonna go ahead and use my email, and once you have signed up, you'll be able to get all the information for your new account at your email address. Okay, so I got my verification email, so all I have to do now is just set a password to my new account. Okay, so now I've set up my account, and you see I'm greeted with this nice little screen here. We'll be able to click this button to start the process of spinning up a new server. Now, one of the cool things is that this is a free trial. So you can just jump in there, and like I'm doing right now, you can experiment with it, see if it works for you, spin up a server, install a site, and you can do so with no cost. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna jump in here, and I'm gonna click this big button that says spin up a new server. Now, as I talked about earlier, you're gonna see here that there is a number of different VPS providers. I'm not gonna break down all of these in terms of what would be best. Unless you're a developer, you're probably not going to notice a lot of the difference between each of these. Now, the one I'm gonna always recommend if you are not sure is the one that actually integrates the most directly with SpinupWP, and that is DigitalOcean. And in fact, they're gonna give you $100 free credit if you create a new DigitalOcean account. So let's go ahead and do that just to make that super simple. Now, one of the other things to note as well is this is that extra step that I was telling you about. And that is we're creating our SpinupWP account, but remember, SpinupWP isn't actually our host. They're the control panel that's gonna make all this super easy for us. We still have to go and actually find that other host. So that's why you saw all those VPS providers from AWS, again, DigitalOcean, Vulture, all of those are hosting companies, VPS providers. So we're gonna pick one. In this case, we're gonna be picking DigitalOcean. So we're gonna have to set up an account with them and then connect it to SpinupWP so SpinupWP can manage that server for us. Okay, so here we are. What we're gonna do is we're gonna click this button. Again, we're gonna get $100 in free credit. So again, this is gonna help preserve the whole idea that we're getting a trial here. You can do all of this without ever actually paying anything. So what we're gonna do is we'll go ahead and create a new account. Okay, and then we'll just click this button that says deploy in seconds. Okay, so now we get to create our account. So I'm just gonna click sign up with email, and we have created my DigitalOcean account. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and check my email where I should have received a verification email to confirm my account. Okay, so then they send you a verification code. So let's go ahead and enter that in and click verify code. Now, one of the things DigitalOcean does add, and again, this is going to change completely based upon each VPS provider, is this one, they are going to ask you for a credit card. But it looks like it is still free for 60 days. So again, if you were just going to try it out, so you can just jump in there, enter in your credit card information. If for whatever reason, DigitalOcean or whatever VPS provider you're using isn't the one that you want to use, just hop back in there. They make it super easy to close your account. So still no risk involved. And again, like I said, for DigitalOcean, at least you are going to get that $100 in free credits, which means that, you know, your first $100 that you would spend at DigitalOcean, you would be completely free. So again, that would happen before you even touch your credit card, but you do have to enter one. I think that's just one of the ways they fight spam. So you have to enter credit card information to start using it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just go ahead and click on Explore Our Control Panel, and this is where we're going to be able to jump in. Now that we have the control panel up and running, we've got everything in DigitalOcean ready to go. Let's pop back over to SpinupWP and let's begin the process of setting this up. So it looks like the first thing that they're going to need is the API token. So we're going to go ahead and grab that real quick by clicking on API. You see tokens and keys. We're going to generate a new token. I'm just going to call this SpinupWP, leave these settings by default, and then we have created one. So let's go ahead and copy that, paste it in, click next, and we see that it has successfully connected to our SpinupWP account. Now here's what I was talking about previously. This is where you get to pick the type of server that you're going to be using. And as you can see, there is a ton of options. So no need to be overwhelmed by this, particularly if you're just going to be running a really small and simple site. You can probably pick one of these cheaper ones, which you can't actually see, that's probably off the screen, but one of these cheaper ones. So as you can see, it starts as low as just $5 a month for 1 gigabyte of bandwidth, 1 CPU, and then 25 gigabytes of storage. So what I would probably recommend is just kick it up $1 just for one of these a little bit better SSD or a little bit better read and write speeds, I would imagine. So I would probably just start here, particularly if you're going to be having a static website. If you've got a website that requires a lot of functionality, such as a forum or a community or things that aren't going to be cached, you don't have as many static items, and you probably want to bump that up a little bit. But the cool thing is that you can start with the lower end server. You can start with one of the cheaper ones, and then you can upgrade it later if you want. And you can do that through DigitalOcean. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick and they've got an Intel, they've got an AMD. I would just recommend just pick the, you can pick either one, but I'm just gonna do the AMD 1 gigabyte of bandwidth, one CPU, 25 gigabytes of space, $6 a month. The next option we have here is the region. That means where the server is gonna live in the world. And so they've got some options here for you. So if you are on the East Coast US, perhaps you wanna pick one of the New York servers. If you're closer to the West Coast like me, maybe you wanna pick a West Coast server such as San Francisco, and then you can select to enable DigitalOcean backups. However, we're not going to do that because we've got another option that we can use instead that will be a little bit easier. And then we're going to go ahead and click next. Now for this particular stage in setting up our new server, we just need a host name that we can just assign to this particular setup of this server. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do demo.thomastv.link. Time zone, I'm personally in Boise, and so now we'll click next. For the database server, you can just go ahead and leave that at MySQL, and then you're going to want to make sure that you save the database information, any information that you have or that you receive from SpinupWP in terms of passwords or account information. Make sure that you copy that to a secure location. You may not be using it yourself. However, if you end up working with a developer, it's going to be important that they have that information, or at least that you have it saved on hand. You can, of course, provide a developer access to your SpinupWP account, but it doesn't hurt to keep those things on hand, again, in a secure place. Okay, we've got our settings. So now let's go ahead and click Provision Server. And as you can see, SpinupWP is now going to go through the process of automating the setup of this server. So it's going to be setting up a server on our DigitalOcean account that is fine-tuned for WordPress. So we'll just wait a few moments and allow that to run the process. Okay, so it looks like it did set up our server successfully. So as I mentioned, this is going to take a little bit of time. According to the previous message, it looked like it was going to take about, and it looks like it did, it took about 10 minutes. Unfortunately, you can just kind of close the window, walk away, go do something else if you need to, and then they just email you once the server has been set up successfully. But as I mentioned, it has been set up, so as we'll be able to see on our dashboard here, we've got this server. We don't have any sites added to it yet, but the server is up and running. And now what we can do to this on this server is install as many sites as we want. Now, do remember that if you are going to be picking a smaller server, which we have, you probably don't want to add too many sites to it. And again, that's going to depend upon how much bandwidth, how much traffic, how busy, how server intensive the particular site is that you're going to be hosting. But if you're going to be hosting a site maybe similar to mine that's got just some static content and that sort of thing, then you're probably going to be able to get away, particularly if you're just starting out with one of the smaller servers. Okay, so let's head on back and take a look at this particular server. And so we're going to now go ahead and do an install of WordPress. So we'll click New Site, and this is where we're going to go ahead and enter in our domain information. So the first thing you're going to want to do is enter in the primary domain, the domain that will apply to this particular site. Now, as I mentioned previously, you are going to need a domain beforehand in order for this to work. So I've done other videos in the past that have dove in a little bit in terms of how to get a domain set up. It's really simple. I recommend a service called Hover, which is where you can register your domain if you haven't already. A lot of people use GoDaddy, so whatever service you want to use in terms of acquiring that domain, that works just great. And on most of these domain registrars, they're going to enable you to edit the DNS information, which is what we're going to use next to connect that domain to this new WordPress site that we're setting up. One of the other things that I will note before we continue is that if you're going to be working on a site that you are developing or designing, or you are building from the ground up, perhaps you're starting a new site, or maybe you transferred an older site over, you're probably first going to want to make sure that you have this set up as a staging environment. So for example, my website domain is thomasmcgee.tv. So as I was transferring that site over to SpinupWP, what I did not do is enter in thomasmcgee.tv. Instead, I created a subdomain, which would be, staging.thomasmcgee.tv, and then I set up everything on SpinupWP, and then I switched everything over. That would require a completely separate video, which maybe I'll do another day, but just be forewarned. You want to make sure that you're first working in a staging environment and don't try to do all of this live and on the fly. Okay, so I have my domain here. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and make sure that we ensure HTTPS. That's going to be important. And then we're going to click Next. Now, they do offer you the option to add text records to the DNS, but in almost every case, you probably just want to make sure that you actually have a domain that's ready to point to the server, whether or not it's a subdomain, as I mentioned, but you want to make sure that you do update those DNS records. And we're going to click Next. And you'll see here that it's going to provide the IP address that we're going to want to add as a listing on our DNS records. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that to clipboard. I'm going to go over to my provider, my DNS provider. I'm going to click Add a Record. I want it to be an A record. And since this is a subdomain, I want to make sure that I add that subdomain. Then we'll enter in the IP address right there, and then I'm going to click Save. See that it's added that. So now we'll just go back over. Once we have added that record, we want to just make sure that we now click I've updated the DNS. And just do note that this may take a few minutes. So if it doesn't happen immediately, don't sweat it. You probably just want to check back a little bit later. So I've clicked I've updated. It says that the DNS has been successfully verified. The next thing we're going to be able to do in this process is we're actually going to be able to set up WordPress. Now, as you'll be able to see here, you'll have this little option to enable a multi-site, which is really cool because a lot of other hosting providers out there charge you extra, sometimes charge a lot extra to be able to do a multi-site. It's just kind of built into SpinupWP. So we'll just go ahead and call this Thomas's demo. Thomas, there we go. Remember, like I said earlier, make sure you're copy and pasting all of these passwords so you have them on hand. This would be if you're a developer or working with a developer, if there's a particular deploy script you want to use, but again, don't think that you have to do anything with that. Database information, you can keep all of this the same. I typically change my database prefix to WP, but again, if you are unsure, and again, your databases are way over your head, totally understandable, just leave all of these as is, but any of the passwords and information, again, not a bad idea to copy these over to a document that you keep secure. And again, if you're not a developer, none of this makes sense to you, that's okay. You still probably want to keep them on hand and secure. Again, I want to emphasize and secure, so that if you work with a developer who wants to help you with your site, you have that information available for him or her. Now we'll click Next, and we're just going to keep these the same. This is the settings for this particular site in terms of PHP. And we're going to enable full page caching. So quick breakdown. Page caching is going to help static pages load faster. So again, if you've got a content site similar to mine, you're gonna want page caching. If you're doing an online shop or something that's user-centric, or you want something that is highly dynamic in nature, you probably wanna keep the page caching off. Or if you're a developer or working with a developer on a site that's in process or being built, you probably wanna keep that page caching off. But for most cases, you're probably gonna wanna keep it on. Then we're gonna click next. We're gonna check to make sure everything looks correct, and then we're going to click add site. And similar to setting up the server, essentially what this is going to do is go through the process of installing WordPress on that server, as well as going through the process of fine-tuning it to make sure that it runs super fast. So we'll just give that a few minutes to go ahead and set that self up. And that's it. It looks like it has successfully set up this new site. So let's go ahead and walk through this a little bit. We'll see that it has the button where you can click to view the site. And it might have taken a few minutes to see if it's actually pointed over. Sometimes, again, it takes some time to propagate. Nope, and it's already pointing over at that new WordPress site. So I'm actually already ready to log in to the admin portion of that site. We'll take a quick look at some of the settings here. Again, you'll be able to change the domain here. So like I said earlier, if you're gonna be working with a staging environment, so if you've got, again, if I'm using my example, staging.thomasmcgee.tv, what I could do is work at that, and then once I'm finished with the site, I could update the domain so it's just thomasmcgee.tv. So that's how you would actually work within a staging environment. It's got the page caching. It's also got the ability built in right here. So like if you want to enable page caching, but you've got some pages that you don't want to be cached, then you can add those here manually. The HTTPS, the security certificate, so that's been installed and up and running. Nginx, so again, that's going to be pretty specific to a developer. Same with FTP, SFTP and SSH. Same with Git. That's going to be very developer friendly. And the other thing that you're definitely going to want to work in here is your backups. Now, the cool thing about the way backups work in SpinupWP is similar to the way that it works with VPS providers, in the sense that you can also pick your backup service. And you've heard me talk a lot about a service called Backblaze B2, which is a very affordable storage platform. And the cool thing is they recently added Backblaze B2 as an option. So if you want to create an Amazon S3 or Backblaze B2, DigitalOcean. So if you want to keep everything in DigitalOcean, you can actually use that service. They've got a separate way that you can actually host through DigitalOcean Spaces. So you can actually have this backup saved there. So they got a number of different options that you can choose from. I typically recommend Backblaze. I'm not going to go through how to set that up. They got a ton of little articles here that will walk you through how to do that. And plus they've got a handy guide that helps you do that as well. But once you add a storage provider, you can actually set up daily automated backups so that you can make sure that both your theme files, your site files, as well as your plugins and all of your content is being backed up on a daily basis. And this is going to be more for the developers, but they've got a really cool error log reporting. So if there's an issue with your site, it's going to have all the information here that's going to help a developer be able to troubleshoot this really easy. So let's go ahead and head back to the dashboard, and then let's go ahead and jump up into the admin just so that we can see that we have, in fact, got a proper install of WordPress. And there you go. You now have a blazing fast WordPress site, just as you would imagine. So it's got all the pieces kind of built into it. So again, this is just a blank install of WordPress, and you're ready to hit the ground running working with your new WordPress site, with your new WordPress host. Super fast, built through or connected with a VPS provider. And pretty much now the sky is the limit for what you can do with SpinupWP. Okay, so that's it. I know that there were a few extra steps that we had to go through to get this up and running, but the cool thing is once you have a provider attached to SpinupWP, once you've got those servers in the way that you want them, you can now create as many sites as you want, as much as your server can handle and hold. So it gives you that power and that flexibility and that freedom to be able to create the type of sites or collection of sites that work best for you. So maybe if you're gonna work with a bunch of clients, setting up sites for them or something like that, this would be an excellent solution, because not only does it make it super easy for you to add and update and manage and maintain all of those sites, but it's also super affordable as well. So as you saw, we're able to add a server for as cheap as $5 a month. We just added a little bit of extra CPU power for that extra dollar, so it's $6 a month. But then if you add in SpinupWP, it's only for a personal, it's only $12 a month. So the great thing is that if it's just gonna be you, if it's just gonna be one server, you've got a grand total of $18 a month, and it's blazing fast and super easy to work with. So as I mentioned, I do work with the SpinupWP team. However, as I started testing this control panel out and connecting a VPS provider, it became the server solution for me that I'm going to be using for all of my websites moving forward. Now we do have an affiliate link, so if you'd like to support the channel, click the link below. Otherwise, it is a super powerful platform that I highly recommend, and so I definitely recommend that you check it out. As always, if you found this video helpful, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.